it's me Erica, and so today I'm finally making a new DIY featuring the boys from Free, celebrating the release of the new season of Free, Dive to the Future. These nesting dolls are really cute to put near your desk to celebrate your love for Free, and just have them as a reminder for every Wednesday when Free comes out. So with that, let us get started. So the supplies you'll need are blank nesting dolls. I actually found mine from the thrift store for about $1, but I actually checked on Etsy and blank nesting dolls actually range from $6 to $7. Mod Podge, acrylic paint, paint brushes, pencils, erasers, and paper. So the first thing I decided to do was actually paint all the dolls a nude color or a skin color. I knew that I was going to be drawing on with these dolls with white pencil, so it wouldn't be able to see it on the current one, on the current color that I was using. And it made it a lot more easier just because on some of the characters their bodies were exposed, so that saved some time later on. So before I actually drew the designs onto the dolls themselves, I sketched it out on a template that I found online, which I will link down below, just so I can know the placement of some of the things and not have to erase it onto the doll as much. This is just a sketch, so I think at some point I was drawing too much because some of these things didn't end up on the dolls because of size constraints, especially on Ray and Nagisa's part. But using it as a scratch makes it a lot easier just so that you can plan. So after the paint has dried on the nesting dolls and your sketch is done, transfer the sketch onto the doll by using it as a reference. As I mentioned, I use white pencil just because when I paint over it, it disappears. I've experienced when I actually just use regular pencil, it still shows over the paint job. So it's a lot easier to do it with some lighter color because it's just going to disappear under the paint with just one coat. So when I was actually sketching it onto the dolls, I just did a rough sketch from the paper just because I knew some of these things wouldn't end up working in the long run, or I would have to actually do them again after I painted like a large portion of it in a certain color. Especially for Ray and Nagisa, I had realized that they were too small in comparison to what I sketched, so I didn't know how much of my drawing would actually transfer onto Ray and Nagisa. So I just left them really blank in the pattern. So after transferring the designs, we are going to go on to painting, which is actually the most time-consuming part because you are doing 5 and you're trying to do all these designs at once. And the first one I decided to do was Haru. During this, I'll probably just talk about my processes and what I did and what I could have done differently, just because these designs are going to be different depending on what you want to do with yours. Because I did the splash free because they are more dynamic with the clothing as opposed to the clothes in season 3's ending, where it is a good ending song and it has so many characters, but I really didn't know what to do with the design of it. So for Haru, I decided to make the head part his whole scarf, and then his whole hat, and then the scarf was the place where it would divide the body with in terms of the doll. I tried my best to shade a lot of these things. I'm not that good at shading. If you are, please teach me. I just tried to look on some videos on how to do some basic shadings, and even looked at Banana Jemana's videos on how she does some of her shadings, and how I saw it was she did like a mixture of the base color, the white or the darker color, and then kind of blended them all together. I tried to achieve that with Haru's scarf and a lot of the other characters. I don't know if I did it justice, but he still ended up looking really cute. And in the original drawing, I was probably gonna make Haru abs, but I just decided against that because it will just look weird. It looked like little lines of squares, and I knew that it would just not, it would take away from the cute factor of the nesting doll. So with the next one, I drew Makoto. Makoto's was actually pretty easy. Again, I tried to do shading with his hat. I had drawn a lot more on the sketch than what I actually ended up painting here. I just didn't know how to achieve the ruffled look without doing it in black, and I had a feeling that if I did black it looked really weird, so I ended up trying to just shade it with different colors of gold and yellow for him, and I ended up doing the stripe pattern and the green. The green I actually had a fun time shading because it was not that hard. The clothes for Makoto in here are actually not the most difficult, who was the most difficult, you asked? Well, we'll go and get there next. But he was pretty easy to do. So now, moving on to Rin, and Rin was the one that I had the hardest doing the paint on, just because I had thought out so many more patterns for him, but it didn't always make it into the nesting dolls because of my lack of skills in replicating it on with paint as opposed to pencil. But I think he did pretty. I actually ended up liking how he looked at the end. In the video, I tried to do his necklace in gold and just try to shade it with gold, but in the end, which is not shown here, I actually ended up just highlighting everything or outlining everything in black. But I really like the paint I used for Rin in terms of the gold and not just the plain yellow. I ended up making his patterns with making like a zigzag triangle pattern and then making 2 lines with him, and I ended up adding a shark tooth to his smile. So now moving on to Ray. Ray actually turned out pretty well in my opinion for what I thought it was going to happen. I didn't know Ray was going to end up looking as good as he did, just because I had a feeling he wouldn't because of the size difference between my drawing and Ray, but he actually turned out pretty okay. And to make the feather, I did the brush strokes feathering to make the feather on the side of his head and then outlined it in black. I ended up putting his glasses on with a nail donning tool, or you can also replicate this with a toothpick or very thin brush. For Ray, I also added gold accents and left his shirt open, which I actually really liked. And then I finally went to Nagisa, and poor Nagisa, I feel like I didn't do him justice just because he was too small, but with what I did, I feel like it represents his colors at least and how he looks like in Splash Free. I try to make it his green like veil his whole head, and then add the bangles on his neck or necklace. And then just try to get the colors right. If I were to redo this again, I'd probably do Nagisa again. Unfortunately, I can't, and I don't think it can get better than this just because he's so small, unless I had a very tiny paintbrush. I think I could redo it, and I should have made the head a little bit larger so that the facial expressions wouldn't be too bad, but he looks pretty cute in his own way too. So after I had painted all the characters, I decided that I noticed that a lot of the nesting dolls have a glossy finish, so I ended up putting Mod Podge to give it that finish. Of course, you don't have to do this. I just saw that a lot of the paint I used were a mixture of matte and satin, so it just didn't like look right to me, and I decided to just put Mod Podge, and Mod Podge dries really clear, so don't worry if you end up using Mod Podge and it's white. it will dry up. And after the Mod Podge is dry, you are finished with the DIY, and then now you can display all the free boys, or at least the main free boys, on your desk all together in a line, or just have the biggest one grace your room, and then when your friends come you can just pop them out. And yeah, I really like this DIY. So let me know if you really love Free. I would love to talk about Free. If you have questions, just don't be afraid to leave it in the description. I will gladly answer them. And with that, if you try this DIY or the many featured on this channel, be sure to use the hashtag ILADIYs on Instagram, Twitter, or Tumblr. Thank you so much, you guys, and see you next time. Bye!